All right. So today we're going to be talking about graying of the soul. So what is that? Why do we experience this stuff like that? In life, often we reflect on our childhood, and at least for me, it often has a lot more color in it, a lot more feeling in it, a lot more that intuition. Now, why is that? Why do we feel that way? Now, what I noticed is your mind always keeps track subconsciously of things that you do which are against its will. Uh, doesn't remember it. It always remembers those small things. The soul always remembers. It keeps track of everything throughout your life, and you slowly start to deviate from that path that you were walking down as a child. Now, the problems you cannot work through often turn into uh, anxiety. Um, Now, that happens because the anxiety builds, right? When you cannot work through a problem, it turns into an anxiety. You gotta sit with it a little bit, you know? Let the anxiety hit you. Let it happen to you. It's not a bad thing. A lot of the time when you try to suppress it, when you try to force it, instead of letting it just, go in through one ear, let the anxiety just hit you and let it go out the other ear. You gotta sit with it a little bit because that's when you really learn. You try to dig deep into yourself when you're sitting with it. And when you sit with it, you find out that the anxiety that you're experiencing isn't actually all that bad. It's honestly usually relatively calm. Sometimes it'll still hurt, but it's usually never as bad as you think it is. You realize it's only the shadow that you've made of the anxiety that's big and scary because it's up against the wall and the lighting is right. And but the anxiety itself isn't actually that big. It's just a shadow. It's still there, but it's not actually that big. Now, you shouldn't expect these answers to come to you instantly, right? When you're digging deep, when you're in meditation, when you're sitting with yourself, um, you want to allow them to flow into your mind. They should be coming in through intuition. So, a lot of times these ideas, they need to come naturally. Now, anxiety that isn't worked through ends up making you feel oftentimes paranoid about the problems that you're going through. Um, this paranoia comes from the fact that the anxiety stacks up. If you let it go in through one ear and then you start fighting it, not letting it go out through the other, it's gonna stay in your head, and it's gonna be there the entire day, and you're gonna be fighting it, and you're gonna start fearing when's the next time it's gonna come, when's the next step, blah blah blah, and you won't be able to enjoy your day. You won't be able to fully relax because you'll always be on guard because that anxiety might be there. And at some point, it becomes paranoia. At some point, that anxiety will end up turning uh, into just carnal reactions that you have to ideas that you've made in your head. Now, your soul or the inner you is in these times asking for you to understand it and not to suppress it. So when you're getting this anxiety, you need to sit with it. You really need to, because it's telling you something. And you won't understand that message until you sit with yourself and let it hit you. When you keep suppressing it, you're fighting against it. You don't let it you don't let it express itself, right? You need to sit with yourself. And this isn't just for anxiety, this could be for other stuff. But when you stop being so tense, when you brace right before pain, and instead you let it just tap you, you know, you realize it's not actually that hard. And this is also why I don't fully agree with a lot of, I guess Goggins is the closest guy whose mentality is very, very on one side, just, push it, suck it up, whatever, keep going, don't think about it. Now, you need to know when to do that, but you also need to know when to reflect, when to give yourself time to think. You need to be balanced. I think that's the lesson to be taken away there. And constantly ignoring that inner self, your soul ends up becoming gray and dry. When you constantly suppress your inner self, it becomes gray. The meaning from your life, it comes from within, not the outer world, not from without. If you do not care for what is within you, if you do not give it attention, if you do not water it, you will only rely on the outer world, which is filled with materials, materiality, and unreliable, unstable things. Materiality is a bad word. I don't even know if it is one. Materialism is probably better. But the point is that it's unstable, and everything that is out there you can't control. You see, you could have a beautiful garden inside of yourself, in your mind, and you can water it every single day. No one can do anything to it, if it's strong enough, if you've built the fences right. But in the outer world, you can't really control what happens to your garden. What if there's a snowstorm? What if there's this? What if there's that? It could be a lot of stuff. And now, the world that you live in, if you constantly ignore, it starts to lose its juiciness, because everything, all of the life that comes from the outer world, you perceive through your inner world. You're like a mirror. It's like the outer world's like an orange. It's juicy. But when it dries, you don't want to eat the orange. It doesn't look appetizing at all. And people themselves are like mirrors. They reflect what they see inside of themselves and reflect it into the outer world. And they reflect it through many different ways. They do it through art, through business, through writing, through poems, whatever. But that all comes from their inner world, what they have built up. And that's why a lot of people that lose that inner self, that become gray, dry on the inside, brittle, they cannot create, because they've lost their color. They've lost that juiciness. Now, in terms of thinking and feeling, graying of the soul leads to individuals who tend to lose that juiciness. Their thinking often revolves around the material world. And by that I mean they're oftentimes focused on the calculating, the results, how will this benefit me, instead of having a more balanced outlook on life. And they often think only about the utility of their actions and not what benefits, like I said, the inner world. Their feelings become defensive, distrustful, and you often assume, I've been there, I catch myself assuming that other people might have bad natures when in fact they haven't done anything. And how can you perceive another person's bad nature if you don't know your own? You need to be aware of both. And once you have a good nature, you could light someone else's nature up as well. Now, in terms of what you want, it will usually stem from that your will starts to only come from the appetite, the ambition, which is not necessarily bad. You want to have appetite. You want to have ambitions, and you want to have this like force about you. But it is all about where the force comes from, where your willpower comes from. It needs to come from something that is within you. This is why I'm stressing the inner part so much. Because it is important, because it's your guide. And if the inner you isn't your guide, the outer world will guide you. And when the outer world is guiding you, it will guide you in a place you don't want to go. And you'll only realize that when you've walked the path and look back, and you'll think, wow, I could have been so much more. All these things that I mentioned, the will, the feeling, the thinking, they blind the inner you. They blind the soul. Now, the soul never disappears, is the thing. The soul is always there. But it becomes hidden behind this fog of the outer world, of the material world. And it does come out once in a while. Everyone still does stuff. Everyone's a good person deep down inside. I truly believe that. They try to be the good person. They're often just weak people, and weak people unfortunately can't help themselves. And I don't mean weak as in not strong, but they're not as connected with what is within them. They're not balanced. And when you're not balanced, you're usually not in control. Now, when you ignore what is within you long enough, life begins to lose its color and become mechanical, and you'll notice yourself you start to become depressed. I mean, you start to live in a gray world. And this graying is really a consequence of only living in the outer world. Because when you only start living in this world, and it's so much easier to do that now than it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, well, however many. Because everything is material now. Everything is focused on that. Most, nature isn't as prevalent. People spend most of their times on phones inside. I'm recording this inside. But it's very easy to rely on that material world now. It's a lot easier than it was before, and it's a lot easier to have this graying. That's why a lot of people are getting depressed. Because they don't see that color. They wouldn't be as depressed if they saw the beauty that this world has to offer. And the reason they can't see it on their way back from work when they look into the sky and see the sun setting is because they don't have the soul, the inner soul, to appreciate it. Now, one of the biggest material things that people want is money. Because of this, even possessions. Many religious sects choose to live lives completely secluded from that aspect, from material possession. And a lot of the time they do this because when given the choice, people tend to usually stray towards their material needs, right? Most people are not minimalists. I'm not a minimalist. I have a lot of stuff in this room right now. But you don't need to be an extreme minimalist. You just need to watch out for the other extreme of being overindulgent in the materialism. You need to know when to throw something away. I think it's healthy to go through your room once in a while and just throw stuff out. You gotta be able to get rid of things. And it should be done quite regularly. People with this overabundance of materialism, possession, money, Um, in whichever sense, they often seem rich to us, but that is usually because we only see them from the perspective they want us to see them, from the outer world. They want their lives to look very nice. They want that, like, nice car, the nice whatever. Now, that is true. If you look at them from the outer world, they look like they've achieved what they want. However, inside, they are often unstable and anxious, and they're usually always in a state of worrying and oftentimes isolated from a lot of people. They're isolated from the rest of the world. I mean, you could see that the people from the top can't relate. Now, power without that inner meaning that you've made for yourself produces fear, because no inner justification. You need to make that self. You need to make that justification for yourself. Why do I want to be rich? Because I'm not trying to demonize money, and I'm not trying to demonize rich people. You could absolutely be wealthy and successful in your career, and no one should be stopping you from doing that. But you could do it in a balanced way. And that's what I'm trying to say, is you need to give yourself a justification for why. And that inner meaning needs to power you into doing the right things. Because the second you gain more power, you'll be more exposed to the individual, to the materialism. And when you're more exposed to it, you'll have more things that could corrupt you. Now, if you try to secure yourself through this power by itself, you will only grow more scared of losing it. If it becomes your stability, if it becomes that foundation, if the money that you've built up becomes your foundation, then you'll just live your life scared of losing that foundation. You can never lose the inner you. So you can never be scared if you've given yourself that inner meaning. Now, what do we do about this? Because we've come across quite a problem. And I like to refer to childhood. I feel like it's a lot more colorful sometimes. Now, as kids, we often imagine things before doing them. Our imagination would create positive mental pictures, which would help guide our actions, right? So, when we imagine something before doing it, for example, if you think about what you'll do before doing it, you could very easily make the right choice, right? Let's say you're in class and someone reminds you, hey, or asks you, hey, what are you going to do after school? Naturally, like, you would say, oh, you think about it? I'm going to do my homework. Now, when you get home, you scroll on your phone and that thought comes to mind and you're like, shouldn't I be doing my homework? But when you're thinking about it during the action, you won't have that power to switch yourself into doing the homework. What you need to do is, and kids do this phenomenally, when you stop thinking and start imagining yourself instead and living in that moment, it will feel wrong to do anything but that picture. When you really, and you should practice this imagination as much as you can. If you imagine yourself doing the homework, and when you get home, the first thing you're going to do is follow that mental picture. You start building these roads that are easy for your brain to walk on. You make it easier for yourself to do the right thing when you imagine first. You also have to be very honest with yourself. You have to be your own critic, but you don't want to be a harsh critic. You want to be just. Don't want to be mean to yourself. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone will have setbacks, ups and downs are completely normal. You will have voices in your head that lie to you and give you a false sense of security, because oftentimes facing that reality is too hard. The most important part is that when you act, do not regret it. Because if you do everything that I just talked about, then even if you do fail, at the end you could say, I have done everything that I could do, and this was just meant to be a lesson for me. And then it truly is a lesson because you actually gave it your all. You gave it everything. Pardon. You actually gave it your all. You gave it everything. Now, saying something is a lesson when you haven't given it your all is an actual excuse. And it doesn't feel right? It doesn't feel like a real lesson until you've gave it everything. And then you could actually learn, and that's when you learn the best. You don't have to, throw yourself into the deep end without a life jacket. You could keep the life jacket on, but you gotta get into the water, right? All right. Now, with that all being said, I will leave you guys with a quote that I'm sure you've all heard of before. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. By Carl Jung. Now, I hope, even though you've probably heard of this, you could maybe use it to further reflect on what was said today. Thank you guys so much.